The glass towers of Nelson Global Holdings gleamed against the New York skyline, reflecting a city that never slept. From the conference room on the 60th floor, the Hudson River stretched out like a sheet of silver, glittering beneath the late afternoon sun. Inside, the air buzzed with quiet anticipation. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Harry Nelson, the billionaire heir who had turned his family's empire into a global powerhouse, sat at the head of the long mahogany table. At 33, his sharp blue eyes and composed demeanor masked the storms of doubt that occasionally drifted through his mind. To the outside world, he looked invincible, a man who had everything: money, power, influence. Yet even the most powerful can stand one signature away from ruin. The deal on the table was monumental. Armitage Group, a giant in international logistics, had promised a merger that would take Nelson Global into an entirely new league. Billions were at stake, and the press had already begun to whisper about the deal of the decade. Harry glanced at the document before him. The legal jargon blurred from repetition. He had reviewed it 100 times. His attorneys had assured him it was clean, that nothing had been overlooked. Marcus Hale, his closest friend for over 15 years, and now his business partner, sat at his right side. Marcus's smile was calm, confident, and almost reassuring. Harry lifted the pen between his fingers. He could already hear the headlines: Nelson signs historic merger. He could see the market reacting, the board celebrating, shareholders raising glasses of champagne. This was supposed to be his legacy. And then the door opened. The sound was small, almost insignificant against the hum of conversation, but it cut through the room like a blade. Heads turned briefly, then dismissed it. Only Harry's hand hesitated, his pen hovering just above the dotted line. A woman pushed a cleaning cart quietly into the room. She wore the standard Nelson Global maintenance staff uniform, her dark hair tied back neatly, and her movements were respectful and precise. She lowered her gaze as though she didn't belong in a space filled with power suits and million-dollar watches. "Apologies," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I'll empty the trash quickly." No one objected. They were too busy clinking glasses early, congratulating themselves on a success not yet sealed. Harry barely noticed her at first, but then her presence drew his attention in a way he couldn't explain. There was something quiet but deliberate about the way she moved. She didn't shuffle like someone who wanted to be invisible. Instead, there was a grace in the way she pushed the cart, as though she carried herself with dignity, despite the simple uniform. She reached the trash bin beside his chair. Leaning down, she pretended to adjust the liner. Then, almost imperceptibly, she shifted closer. Her lips moved. A whisper so faint it might have been mistaken for the rustle of paper. "Don't sign," she breathed. "It's a trap." Harry froze. For a moment, time collapsed into silence. The pen slipped from his fingers and landed softly on the table. His chest tightened, breath catching like someone had cut the air from the room. What he whispered back, his voice so low that no one else could hear. The woman, this cleaning staff member, who should have been invisible, straightened slowly. Her eyes, a deep and unwavering brown, met his for the briefest heartbeat. There was no fear in them, only urgency, only truth. Then she looked away, resuming her role as though nothing had happened. She picked up the trash can, placed it back into her cart, and began pushing it toward the door. Calm, controlled. But Harry's world had tilted. Harry Marcus leaned toward him with a thin smile, his tone laced with subtle impatience. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," another voice was added from across the table. Javier Ramos, the lead negotiator from Armitage. "Mr. Nelson, are you ready to sign?" The contract lay before him, pages fanned like the wings of a trap he suddenly didn't want to enter. He glanced at Marcus's face, Javier's, and the retreating figure of the woman in the gray uniform, pushing her cart through the door. Harry swallowed hard. I need 5 minutes. A hush fell over the room. Marcus's smile faltered. 5 minutes. Yes, Harry said, standing abruptly. His chair scraped the floor, the sound harsh in the tense silence. There's something I need to take care of. Javier's brows drew together in irritation. Mr. Nelson, everything has been reviewed. There's nothing left to discuss. Harry's tone hardened. 5 minutes. Without waiting for another objection, he strode to the door and stepped out, letting it close firmly behind him. The hallway stretched long and gleaming under fluorescent lights. At the far end, the woman was already pushing her cart, her movements steady but quick. You. His voice echoed sharper than he intended. She stopped. Harry approached his footsteps decisive, his chest still tight with adrenaline. He pointed at her. With me. Now. For a heartbeat, she hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face. Then, with a slow nod, she abandoned the cart and followed him. They entered a small break room, tucked away behind the executive suites. Harry shut the door firmly, the latch clicking into place. He turned his posture rigid, his eyes locked on hers, with an intensity that could unnerve anyone. Explain, he demanded. Right now. And make me believe you're not completely insane for interrupting the most important signing of my career. The woman Scarlett Anderson, though he did not yet know her name, stood with her back straight, holding a trash bag loosely in one hand. She looked smaller in the room's sterile brightness, yet something about her presence filled the silence. I know how it sounds, she said, her voice trembling at first but gaining steadiness. But I overheard conversations, things no one else did. They're setting you up. If you sign that contract, you'll lose everything. Harry's jaw tightened. He wanted to laugh, to dismiss her as delusional. But something in her eyes stopped him. Something raw and unshakable. Who, he pressed. Armitage, she whispered. And your partner, Marcus Hale. His chest constricted. Marcus, his best friend, the man who had stood beside him since college, who had been the best man at his wedding and helped him rebuild Nelson Global from the ground up. It couldn't be. And yet Scarlett's eyes did not waver. They've hidden debts. They've rewritten clauses. If you sign, they'll control everything. You'll walk out thinking you won, when in truth, you'll have signed your company away. The silence between them was suffocating. Harry took a step closer, his gaze sharp and unrelenting. What's your name? Scarlett. Scarlett Anderson. How long have you worked here? 8 months. Night shifts. His lips pressed into a line. Scarlett, if this is a lie, if this is some fantasy you've built to get attention, you'll be fired immediately, and you'll never work in this city again. Scarlett bit her lip, but she didn't look away. I understand. But if I stayed silent and watched you lose everything, I'd never forgive myself. Harry turned toward the window. The Manhattan skyline stretched wide, glittering with life. The city continued oblivious to the storm beginning in his chest. She had nothing to gain, nothing to win. And yet here she stood, risking her livelihood to warn him. He turned back. Do you have proof? Her nod was firm. Photos, records, screenshots. Tonight, 7 o'clock. I'll show you everything. Harry studied her, the weight of decision pressing hard against his chest. Finally, he nodded once. 7 o'clock. Right here. If you can't convince me, tomorrow will be your last day here. Scarlett's gaze was steady. I'll be here. When she left, Harry pressed his forehead against the cool glass. His pulse hammered, the city spinning beneath him. For the first time in his career, He was hesitating, and somewhere in his mind, the echo of her whisper lingered like a haunting melody. Don't sign. It's a trap. And here, dear listener, the story truly begins. If Scarlett's whisper had never reached Harry's ear, history would have been written differently. But fate has its way of weaving lives together through chance, risk, and courage. I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether you've followed along. Was Scarlett's bravery the spark of destiny, or simply reckless courage? Share your feelings in the comments. I read every single one. And if this tale has already captured your heart, a simple like lets me know you'd like to continue the journey. Follow the channel so you won't miss the twists yet to come, because trust me, this is only the beginning. The city was painted molten hues as the sun dipped behind Manhattan's skyline. Harry Nelson watched the lights scatter across the glass towers from his penthouse office, washing the city in gold and shadow. He stood with his hands in his pockets, trying to steady the restless rhythm of his thoughts. The whisper still echoed in his ears. Don't sign. It's a trap. Hours had passed since the conference room, yet he hadn't touched the contract again. Marcus had pressed him afterwards, trying to soothe his hesitation with a carefully rehearsed smile, but Harry had brushed him off. He'd bought himself time until 7 o'clock, and now the clock on his desk read 6:30. He loosened his tie, exhaled slowly, and stared at the skyline again. He had faced hostile takeovers, market crashes, and the ruthless scrutiny of Wall Street. But never before had his confidence wavered like this. It was absurd. A whisper from a woman he barely knew, someone who pushed a cleaning cart through the corridors at night, had planted doubt deep enough to shake him. And yet, he couldn't ignore how she'd looked at him. Direct, unflinching. She hadn't been seeking pity or attention. A raw honesty in her gaze gnawed at him, demanding to be believed. At exactly 6:58, the door to the break room opened. Scarlett Anderson stepped inside. Gone was the industrial cart and the hum of fluorescent lights. She carried only a worn leather satchel slung across her shoulder. Her uniform was still the same faded gray functional, but something in how she carried herself felt different now, more deliberate. Harry closed the door behind her. The tension between them was immediate, a chord strung taut, humming with unspoken questions. "You're on time," he said, his voice steady, though his chest tightened. Scarlett nodded, eyes scanning the room as though making sure no one else had followed. "I had to be." Harry gestured toward the small table in the center. "Please show me." She sat, placing the satchel carefully before her. Her fingers lingered on the clasp, hesitating for a brief moment. Then she opened it, pulling out a slim tablet and a small stack of papers. 3 weeks ago, she began, her voice low. "I was cleaning Marcus Hale's office on the 32nd floor. He left in a rush, and I heard voices through the adjoining wall. He didn't know the partition vent carried sound straight into the storage room. I shouldn't have listened, but—" Her eyes flickered up, meeting his. "They were talking about you, about this merger. I heard Marcus and a woman." Harry stiffened. "Who?" Scarlett slid the tablet across the table. A blurred photo appeared on the screen, captured through the narrow crack of a half-closed door. A tall blonde woman dressed in designer silk, leaning close to Marcus. Her laughter caught mid-frame. Harry's throat went dry. Sophia Lane. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in 2 years. Once, she had been the woman he thought he might marry. She had left abruptly, claiming they were too different, that his devotion to work left no room for her ambitions. The truth had left him gutted. And now her image burned on the screen, sitting in Marcus's office, conspiring. Scarlett pressed play on an audio file. The recording crackled with static, but 2 voices emerged clearly. "Once he signs, we'll have complete control. Marcus's voice declared. Are you sure? Sophia's laugh followed, sweet but sharp as broken glass. Harry suspects nothing. He's always been too trusting, Marcus replied. It was true with you, and it will be true now. By the time he realizes, it'll be too late. Harry's hands clenched against the table. The air felt thin, like he was breathing through smoke. Marcus's voice, which had toasted his triumphs and comforted him in grief, now dripped with betrayal. And Sophia, her laugh was poison. Scarlett's voice cut softly through the silence. There's more. She slid a paper forward. Grainy photos of contract pages. Clauses circled in red ink. The version they showed you says you'll keep 60% control. You'll only have 20 in the real version, the one they'll file once you sign. They'll transfer the rest through a subsidiary. Harry scanned the page, his vision blurring with anger. Fraud, deception, treachery dressed in legal language. Scarlett swiped the tablet again, revealing a bank statement. This transfer happened last week. $15 million from Armitage's account, directly to Marcus Hale's account. The weight of betrayal pressed down on Harry's chest until he thought it might crush him. 15 years of friendship twisted into this. He turned to the window, the glittering skyline now darkening into night. Why? His voice was barely audible. Why would he do this? Sometimes money changes people, Scarlett said softly. Or maybe they were always like this, and you didn't want to see it. Harry closed his eyes, the words slicing deeper than he expected. She was right. He had refused to see. Marcus's ambition had always been sharp, but Harry had interpreted it as loyalty, as shared drive. And Sophia, he had excused her hunger for status as simple restlessness. Now, both stood revealed. He turned back to Scarlett, his voice heavy. Why are you telling me this? You could have stayed silent. You could have walked away. Scarlett hesitated, then exhaled. Because it's the right thing. And because I couldn't stand to see them destroy you the same way they killed me. Her words trembled at the edges, carrying weight unspoken. Harry studied her. There was a mystery here he couldn't unravel yet. She wasn't just a janitor who stumbled across secrets. She had sharpness in her, a mind that saw the gaps in contracts and the discrepancies in numbers. And yet she wore a uniform that kept her invisible in these halls. Scarlett. He said, his tone quieter now, almost searching. How do I know these aren't fabricated? How do I trust that you're not manipulating me yourself? Her gaze didn't falter. I understand why you doubt me. If you want more proof, I'll get it. But if you sign tomorrow, the company won't be left to save. Harry leaned back, the storm inside him still raging. His instinct screamed for caution. Yet the evidence on the table, the voice recordings, the bank transfers, all pointed in one direction. He did not want to believe. He wanted Marcus to remain the friend he thought he knew. But denial no longer offered comfort. I need more, Harry said finally. Absolute certainty. If I accuse my partner and Sophia Lane of fraud, I need something to hold up against everything they throw at me. Scarlett nodded once. Then I'll get it. But it will be risky. Their eyes met. For the first time, Harry saw beyond her uniform. He saw strength tempered by sacrifice, resilience born from survival. And he felt something shift inside him. Not trust, not yet, but something that resembled hope. Be careful, he said, his voice quieter now. You could be in danger if Marcus realizes you know this much. A faint smile tugged at Scarlett's lips, weary but proud. Danger stopped scaring me a long time ago. The room fell into silence, filled only by the faint hum of the city outside. Harry found himself staring at her, mesmerized by the curve of her face, the fire in her eyes. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, braver, sharper, more unyielding. For a moment, The billionaire and the janitor were no longer separated by glass ceilings or boardroom walls. For a moment, they were simply two people standing at the edge of betrayal, bound by the fragile thread of truth. Harry exhaled long and slow. Then we find out the truth. Together. Scarlett's nod was firm, her voice steady. We will. When she left, Harry remained alone in the dim light of the break room. The evidence lay scattered across the table, fragments of a betrayal he could no longer ignore. Marcus Hale, Sophia Lane, the Armitage deal. His empire's foundation trembled, but something unexpected flickered beneath the rubble. The image of Scarlett Anderson standing unafraid before him, her whisper still haunting the silence. Don't sign. It's a trap. He knew then this was no longer just about saving his company. It was about saving himself. The city never truly slept. By dawn, New York streets pulsed again with honking taxis, early risers, and the endless shuffle of footsteps chasing ambitions. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite, Harry Nelson stood watching the city awaken, his coffee untouched on the desk. Sleep had eluded him. Each time he closed his eyes, Scarlett's voice returned. If you sign tomorrow, you'll lose everything. Her words lingered like a ghost, looping through his mind until morning. Harry had built his career on facts, figures, and strategies. He didn't make decisions based on whispers in dark hallways. And yet the evidence Scarlett had shown him, the photos, the altered clauses, the audio file, had stripped away his certainty, like wind tearing at sails. But what unsettled him most wasn't Marcus's or Sophia's betrayal. It was Scarlett herself. Who was this woman? A janitor with the sharpness to dissect forged contracts. A night shift worker with the courage to confront billionaires. She didn't fit the uniform she wore. He had to know more. By mid-morning, Harry walked into the Human Resources Division of Nelson Global. The department was quiet. Employees startled to see the CEO himself stride in without announcement. Martha. He greeted the senior administrator, an older woman with tidy glasses and cautious eyes. Mr. Nelson, she stammered, standing quickly. How can I help you? I need a file, he said, tone clipped but calm. Scarlett Anderson, cleaning staff, night shift. Bring me everything you have. Martha hesitated. The cleaning staff. Did something happen? Just routine. Harry lied smoothly. Moments later, she handed him a slim folder, thinner than he expected. He thanked her with a curt nod and left, his pulse quickening as he flipped it open in the corridor. The first page stopped him cold. Scarlett Anderson, 28 years old, Columbia University, Bachelor of Business Administration, minor in corporate finance. Previous employment, Deloitte Consulting. Harry blinked, his steps faltering. Deloitte, one of the most respected firms in the world. Why in God's name was she scrubbing floors in his office tower? He skimmed further. Notes marked her departure as resignation. No explanation. Then hired under emergency placement. Excellent performance reviews. Reliable. No disciplinary history. And then, tucked behind the resume, a line that hit him harder than he expected. Dependent Michael Anderson, 22 years old. Congenital heart condition. Harry closed the folder, slowly exhaling. So that was it. The brilliant, capable woman in a faded uniform wasn't simply a cleaning staffer. She was a woman who had carried the weight of her family, swallowed her pride, and taken any job that would cover her brother's medical insurance. Suddenly, everything about her urgency made sense. Her eyes were filled with strength and sorrow, her determination to risk everything for a man who had never noticed her. She was fighting battles no one else saw. And now, somehow, their battles had collided. Later that afternoon, Harry found Scarlett again. She was in a small conference room on the 12th floor, standing on a stool to wipe dust from the tall windows. Sunlight slanted across her face, making her skin glow with a quiet radiance. She didn't notice him at first. "Scarlett," he said softly. She startled, turning quickly, the rag slipping from her hand. "Mr. Nelson Harry." Her voice carried both surprise and a hint of guardedness. He stepped inside, closing the door. "I looked into your file." Her body stiffened, the brightness in her eyes dimming. "You what? Columbia University, Deloitte Consulting, corporate finance." He oversaw her. "Why didn't you tell me who you are?" Scarlett's jaw tightened. She bent to pick up the rag, grounding herself in the task. "Because it doesn't matter," she said bitterly. "Not here." Harry frowned. "How could it not matter?" "Because no one cares." She snapped, then stopped herself, pressing her lips together. She turned away, staring out the window at the city sprawling below. "No one cares how many degrees I have or where I used to work. All they see is a black woman with a mop in her hand. To them, I'm just the cleaning lady." The rawness in her voice struck him harder than any accusation could. "Scarlett." She laughed softly, humorless. "How did I end up here?" "Fine. I worked at Deloitte for 2 years. I was good at it. Too good. But when it came time for promotions, there was always a reason. First, they said I needed more experience. Then I didn't fit the company culture." Her fingers tightened around the rag. "Do you know what that means?" "It means I didn't look the part. It means they couldn't imagine someone like me sitting in a glass office making million-dollar decisions. So they kept me in place until I was forced to resign." Harry stayed silent, the weight of her words pressing against him. "I didn't have the luxury to fight back." She continued, her tone steadier now. "My brother Michael was born with a heart defect. The surgery cost nearly $200,000. Insurance barely covers half. When Deloitte let me go, I couldn't risk unemployment. So I took whatever job I could find that had a health plan." Her shoulders straightened, as if daring him to judge her. "That's why I'm here. I push this cart at night, while men like Marcus sip champagne upstairs." Harry felt a tightness in his chest, which he couldn't name. Anger, yes, at the injustice. But also admiration, a reluctant awe at the resilience standing before him. "You deserved better," he said quietly. Scarlett gave a small, weary smile. "We all do. But life doesn't always hand out fairness." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy but intimate. Then Harry spoke again, his voice softer. "That's why you recognize the forged clauses. You've spent years analyzing contracts. That's why you came to me." Scarlett turned to face him fully. "Partly, but also because—" She hesitated, then lowered her gaze. "Because you're different from them. I've watched you for months. You greet people whom others ignore. You look people in the eye no matter what they do. And when I saw Marcus and Sophia planning to destroy you, I couldn't stay silent." Harry's pulse quickened. The words, though spoken with restraint, carried something unspoken beneath them. Something fragile. Something dangerous. He took a step closer, his voice almost a whisper. "Scarlett, you risked everything. Why?" Her eyes met his, steady now, glimmering with the truth that leaves no room for denial. "Because someone has to stand on the side of what's right. And because I know what it feels like to be betrayed." The words hung between them, charged with a quiet electricity. The moment was broken by the sound of footsteps echoing in the corridor. Scarlett quickly returned to her cleaning, raising the rag like nothing had passed between them. The door creaked open. Marcus Hale stepped in. Harry greeted him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I didn't expect to find you here." Harry forced a calm expression, stepping slightly aside so Marcus wouldn't notice the tension in the air. Just checking on things. You know how particular I am." Marcus's gaze flicked to Scarlett, lingering long enough to sharpen the air. "Since when do you check on cleaning staff personally?" Harry's smile was practiced, measured. Since I decided to pay closer attention to details, he moved toward the door, clapping Marcus lightly on the shoulder. "Speaking of more information, did you reschedule with Armitage?" "Yes. 3 o'clock this afternoon." Marcus's tone carried an edge. "I hope there won't be any more hesitation this time." "Of course not," Harry replied smoothly. "Let's grab lunch later. I want to go over a few clauses again." Marcus studied him momentarily, suspicion flickering like a shadow across his face. But then he nodded, letting Harry lead him out. Scarlett remained at the window as the door closed, cloth in hand, her body tense. She had heard Marcus's tone. She had felt his suspicion. The walls were closing in, and Harry knew it. That night, long after the office had emptied, Scarlett sat in her small apartment in Brooklyn, the hum of traffic outside mixing with the faint sound of her brother's labored breathing from the next room. She ran her fingers over the tablet, reviewing the files she still had to uncover. Marcus was watching them now. She could feel it. One misstep, and not only would Harry lose everything she and Michael could lose, far more. Yet, despite the fear pressing down on her chest, Scarlett's thoughts circled back to one moment earlier that day, when Harry Nelson, the billionaire untouchable, had looked at her, not with pity, not with dismissal, but with something else: recognition. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Meanwhile, across town, Harry sat alone in his penthouse, a glass of scotch untouched on the table. Marcus had smiled at dinner, but Harry had caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes. The game had changed, Marcus suspected, and Scarlett was now in danger because of him. Harry leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The city lights bled through the windows, but the only image in his mind was Scarlett, standing proud despite her uniform, her voice steady with conviction. Somehow, against all logic, she had become the one person he trusted in a world collapsing around him. And he knew, with a clarity that made his chest ache, he would not let Marcus destroy her. The following afternoon unfolded with an uneasy stillness, as if the city sensed the storm gathering beneath the polished glass of Nelson Global. Scarlett Anderson moved through the 15th floor with her cart, as she did daily, wiping polished surfaces until they gleamed. Yet her chest carried a weight she could not shake. Since Marcus Hale had entered the conference room yesterday, suspicion was in his eyes, and she felt the invisible noose tightening. She had lived with danger before, the kind that crept into her life through unpaid bills, doctors' warnings, the constant fear of losing the fragile thread keeping her brother alive. But this was different. This was danger in the open, dressed in tailored suits and masked with smiles. Marcus had seen something in Harry's hesitation that betrayed the shift beneath the surface. And Scarlett knew men like Marcus. They didn't leave loose ends. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Harry. The way he had stood before her, not as a billionaire insulated by glass walls, but as a man listening. She had seen the flicker of doubt in his eyes, yes, but also something more. Respect, recognition, perhaps even trust. It had been enough to give her courage, but courage could not protect her forever. At precisely 5 o'clock, the building's intercom crackled to life. A voice announced that all employees were impleasely, so please report immediately to the main auditorium for an urgent security meeting. Scarlett froze. Urgent meetings for all staff were rare, almost unheard of. She set down her cloth, her stomach twisting. Something was wrong. She went down with the others, blending into the crowd of office staff in suits and polished heels. Her uniform marked her as different, But she kept her head high, her steps steady. She would not show him fear if Marcus meant to play a game. The auditorium buzzed with whispers as hundreds of employees filed in. Harry Nelson sat in the front row, his profile sharp against the stage lights, expression unreadable. For the briefest moment, Scarlett's eyes found his. Confusion flickered there, even worry. Then Marcus Hale stepped onto the stage. His presence commanded silence. Tall, impeccably dressed, his smile practiced to perfection, he held a folder in his hands as though it were scripture. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Marcus began, his voice echoing easily through the microphone. "Unfortunately, I must address a grave matter of security within our company." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Scarlett's chest tightened. She could already feel where this was leading. "Yesterday," Marcus continued, his tone grave, "and we discovered that confidential documents had been removed from executive offices. Sensitive information has been compromised. After a thorough internal review with the assistance of our security team, we have identified the individual responsible." He paused, scanning the crowd. Then his gaze landed directly on her. Scarlett Anderson, cleaning staff. The room shifted, hundreds of eyes snapping toward her. Scarlett stood frozen, heat flooding her cheeks, though her spine remained rigid. The whispers swelled, curious, incredulous, condemning. "Miss Anderson," Marcus said smoothly, "would you please step forward?" The walk down the aisle felt endless. Her legs trembled, but she forced them into grace, each step echoing like a drumbeat in her chest. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her falter. On stage, Marcus flipped open the folder, holding up glossy photographs. "These images from our security cameras show Miss Anderson entering executive offices outside her scheduled cleaning hours." Gasps rose from the audience. Harry leaned forward, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the photographs. Marcus laid the next piece of evidence before the crowd-printed pages. Furthermore, images recovered from her phone reveal photographs of confidential documents. This constitutes a serious breach of trust and potentially corporate espionage. Scarlett felt the sting of humiliation, the cruelty of being paraded before her colleagues as a thief. But worse than the whispers, worse than Marcus's cutting tone, was the sight of Harry Nelson sitting silent, eyes unreadable, his loyalty torn. "Miss Anderson," Marcus said, voice heavy with false authority, "how do you explain this?" Scarlett swallowed hard. She looked to Harry, her voice breaking but steady enough to carry. "I wasn't stealing. I was trying to protect." "Protect what?" Marcus cut her off, his tone sharp. "Your interests. Were you planning to sell this information to our competitors?" "No." Scarlett's voice rose, desperation threading through her composure. "I was protecting Mr. Nelson." "Enough." Marcus slammed his palm against the podium, his voice a whip crack. "I will not allow a dishonest employee to defame this company or its executives." Scarlett turned, locking eyes with Harry. Her gaze pleaded, begged him to see her, to remember the evidence she had placed in his hands. "Stand up. Say something. Please." But Harry remained still, his lips pressed tight, his hands clenched on his knees. His silence felt like betrayal more profound than Marcus's lies. Tears burned at the corners of Scarlett's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Marcus's voice cut through again. "Security escort. Miss Anderson out of the building. Effective immediately. She is terminated for cause and barred from company premises." Two guards approached, their expressions apologetic but firm. Scarlett lifted her chin. "I can walk on my own." Her voice, though trembling, carried a dignity that no accusation could strip away. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. Her eyes locked with Harry's, and her voice rang clear through the stunned silence of the room. When you find out the truth, she said, remember this moment. Remember that you had the chance to do the right thing and chose not to. The words cut like glass. Harry flinched, his chest aching as though struck. Then the doors closed behind her. The late afternoon air was heavy on the sidewalk outside with exhaust and noise. One of the guards handed Scarlett a cardboard box with her few belongings, cleaning supplies, a worn notebook, and a framed photo of her brother. "I'm sorry, Miss Anderson," the older guard murmured. "Orders are orders." Scarlett nodded, her dignity intact, though tears streaked her face. She turned and walked toward the subway, the weight of the box pressing against her chest, the greater weight pressing against her heart. Inside, she carried the sharpest pain of all the knowledge that Harry Nelson, the man she had risked everything to save, had sat silent while she was destroyed. Back in the auditorium, Harry remained in his seat long after the others had filed out. The noise of whispers faded, leaving only the pounding of his heart. Marcus approached, placing a hand on his shoulder, his expression painted with false sympathy. "I know this wasn't easy, Harry. She seemed like a good employee, but the evidence was undeniable." Harry's jaw clenched. The photographs, the camera stills, the folder, all so perfectly prepared, so conveniently damning. And yet, Scarlett's voice haunted him. "If you sign tomorrow, you'll lose everything." The truth warred with doubt, shredding his certainty from both ends. "Yes," Harry muttered almost to himself. The evidence was clear. "Exactly," Marcus said smoothly. "Now we can focus on what matters, the merger. Tomorrow morning, first thing. No more delays." Harry forced a nod, but the words lodged in his throat like splinters. As Marcus walked away, Harry remained seated, staring at the empty stage. Scarlett's final words rang louder than any boardroom applause. "You had the chance to do the right thing and chose not to." He closed his eyes, shame burning in his chest. Harry Nelson felt powerless, for the first time in years, not against markets or competitors, but against his silence. And somewhere in the city, Scarlett Anderson walked alone, carrying her broken dignity and the burden of knowing she had tried to save him. He had let her down. And now it was too late. The city outside glowed with restless light, but inside, Harry Nelson's penthouse, darkness pressed against the glass. He sat alone at his desk, the contract folder untouched before him. A glass of scotch stood nearby, the amber liquid catching faint shards of light, but he hadn't drunk a drop. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger, haunted eyes, jaw-tight posture, rigid as though bracing against an invisible storm. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Scarlett, standing in the auditorium, her voice trembling but proud as the guards led her away. Her last words had cut through him sharper than Marcus's accusations ever could. "You had the chance to do the right thing and chose not to." He hadn't answered. He hadn't defended her. And the guilt of that silence felt heavier than any betrayal he had faced in business. Harry pressed his hands against his face, groaning softly. 15 years of friendship with Marcus. Memories of late nights building Nelson Global, of celebrations and shared ambitions. And Sophia, her laughter had once been warmth, not poison. How could the people he trusted most twist themselves into enemies without him seeing? But Scarlett had seen. Scarlett, who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, had tried to protect him. And he had repaid her with silence. The shame coiled inside him like a tightening chain. But shame was no weapon. Facts were. Evidence was. Harry sat up straighter, pulling the contract closer. He had read it a dozen times before, but tonight he forced himself to strip away every assumption, every blind spot. The truth would be buried in the fine print if Scarlett were right. Hours bled away as he combed through each page, cross-referencing tracing clauses like web threads. His eyes burned, his head throbbed, but he refused to stop. And then on page 47, something strange. A reference. See Addendum Z, post-merger asset distribution. Harry frowned. He didn't recall ever seeing an Addendum Z. He rifled through the folder again. Nothing. He accessed the digital copy on his secure laptop, but there was still nothing, no Addendum Z. But the contract referenced it. It had to exist. His pulse quickened. He leaned into his keyboard, opening the secure server of Nelson Global. Marcus and Sophia had left their footprints somewhere, he was certain. The building was silent, save for the faint hum of electronics. Midnight stretched into 2 a.m. as Harry navigated encrypted files. His access as CEO, unlocking doors, Marcus might have assumed he'd never open. At last, buried deep within an unlabeled folder, hidden under layers of encryption, he found it. Addendum Z. Hands trembling. Harry opened the file. The blood drained from his face. In dense legal language, the addendum stated that 80% of Nelson Global's assets would be transferred to Armitage International Holdings, a subsidiary registered in the Cayman Islands, following the merger. On the surface, it looked legitimate, buried beneath jargon and cross-references. But Harry's eyes narrowed as he scrolled down to the ownership registry. 2 names: Marcus Hale, Sophia Lane. It hit him like a physical blow. His best friend, his former lover. Together they had built a company in secret, an elaborate shell designed to siphon everything Harry had built, every drop of sweat and sacrifice, into their hands. The room spun. He clutched the edge of the desk, steadying himself. His chest felt tight, his breath shallow. And still, he read on. Emails attached to the addendum confirmed the scheme. In one, Marcus wrote, "By the time Harry realizes what's happened, we'll be offshore. He'll be left with debt and nothing else." Sophia's reply, "He was always too trusting, even with me. That's why I left him. He'll never see it coming." Harry's stomach twisted. The woman who had once whispered promises of forever in his ear, who had walked away claiming their worlds were too different, had left because she wanted more power and wealth. And Marcus had been waiting, willing, ready to give it to her at Harry's expense. 15 years of friendship. 2 years of love. All shattered into a cruel joke. Harry closed his eyes, pressing his forehead into his palms. He had seen betrayals in business before, but this was personal. This was his life being gutted from the inside out. And through the haze of anger and grief, Scarlett's face surfaced again. Her fierce gaze, her trembling voice, her courage. She had known. She had warned him. And he had abandoned her. The weight of that realization broke something in him. By dawn, Harry had printed copies of the addendum, the emails, and the bank transfers he uncovered after digging further into company accounts. $23 million rerouted in the past 2 months into accounts tied to Marcus. The paper trail was undeniable. His hands shook as he held the evidence. It was enough to destroy Marcus, enough to expose Sophia, enough to prove Scarlett right, but not enough to erase what he had done to her. Her words haunted him. You had the chance to do the right thing and chose not to. How could he face her now? At 8 a.m., Marcus strode into Harry's office as though nothing had changed. His smile polished his voice warm. "Big day," he said. "The board is eager. Armitage is waiting. This merger is our crowning achievement, Harry. You'll see." Harry forced himself to mask the fury boiling beneath his skin. He tucked the printed addendum into his briefcase, his expression unreadable. Later, he said, "I'll review one more time before signing." Marcus tilted his head, searching Harry's eyes. "You've been restless. Is there something I should know?" Harry shook his head. "Just nerves." Marcus's smile deepened, but his gaze remained sharp, calculating. He clapped Harry's shoulder before leaving his voice light. "Trust me, Harry. This is our moment." Harry's chest burned with the irony. Trust me. Trust. The very thing Marcus had poisoned. That night, when the city had quieted and the building emptied, Harry stood again by the glass wall of his penthouse. The evidence spread across the desk, but his eyes weren't on it. They were in the memory of Scarlett walking out with her dignity intact, even as the world collapsed on her shoulders. She had fought for him when he hadn't fought for her. And now, he owed her more than proof, more than apologies. He owed her justice. Harry clenched his fists, his voice low but resolute as he whispered into the stillness, "I'll make this right. For her. For everything." The address lay scribbled on a slip of paper in Harry Nelson's hand as his black BMW glided through streets that were nothing like the polished avenues of Manhattan. In Pilsen, old brick buildings leaned against one another, their paint faded by decades of weather. Spanish signs decorated corner shops, and the aroma of fried tortillas mixed with the metallic scent of the L train above. It was a resilient neighborhood. Children darting between hydrants, elders talking on stoops, workers trudging home after shifts that had drained but not defeated them. Harry had never set foot here, and yet this was where Scarlett Anderson lived. The contrast between their worlds struck him like a blow. He had spent his life in glass towers and penthouses where silence was chosen, not imposed. Scarlett lived here, where survival demanded grit and compromise, where dignity was held not in wealth, but in persistence. He parked near a 3-story walk-up, its facade worn windows patched with tape. He sat behind the wheel for a long moment, his hand frozen on the key. A man who could dismantle billion-dollar deals suddenly found himself unable to face a single woman's door. But Scarlett was no ordinary woman. She was the one voice who had dared to pierce through his blindness, the one who had risked everything for him, and whom he had betrayed in silence. Harry exhaled, grabbed the folder of documents he had gathered, and stepped into the chilly evening air. The staircase creaked under his weight as he climbed to the second-floor apartment, 2B. The number was faded, the brass dulled. He knocked gently, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. For a moment, only silence. Then the scrape of a chain lock, the door opening just a sliver. Scarlett's face appeared in the gap, her eyes weary, shadowed by sleeplessness. Her voice was cold as winter steel. "What are you doing here?" Harry's throat tightened. "Scarlett, please. I need to talk to you." Her gaze sharpened. "You've done enough talking, or rather, not talking." The bitterness in her tone sliced him deeper than any boardroom insult ever had. "Just 5 minutes," he whispered, desperation threading through the calm veneer he usually wore like armor. Scarlett hesitated. From behind her, a weak voice called out, "Scarlett, who is it?" Harry caught a glimpse of a young man, thin, pale, his movements labored as he entered the frame. Scarlett sighed, undoing the chain. She opened the door fully, her posture rigid, defensive. "Come in, but don't expect forgiveness." The apartment was small but immaculate. The furniture was worn, but neatly arranged, family photographs lining the walls. A faint hum of medical equipment filled the air, blending with the scent of chamomile tea. "Mr. Nelson," the young man said with a faint smile, extending a frail hand. "You must be the boss my sister used to work for." Harry took the hand, gently struck by how light and fragile it felt. "Former boss," Scarlett corrected quickly, her eyes never leaving Harry. "Harry, this is my brother Michael." Michael's resemblance to Scarlett was unmistakable. The same deep brown eyes, though his lacked her fire, dulled instead by illness. His skin was pale, stretched thin over sharp cheekbones. "It's good to meet you," Harry said softly. Michael smiled faintly. "Scarlett talks about you sometimes." Says you're not like the others. Scarlett's cheeks flushed, but she turned away, busying herself with tidying a spotless table. Michael, you should rest. I'm fine, he murmured. But he obeyed, retreating slowly toward a bedroom at the end of the narrow hall. Harry watched him disappear, then turned back to Scarlett. The silence between them felt heavy, loaded with all the words he should have spoken in the auditorium, but hadn't. I found the proof. Harry began, his voice low but steady. The addendum, the bank transfers. Marcus and Sophia, they planned everything. Scarlett, you were right. Her laugh was short, bitter. Oh, now you believe me. After I was dragged out in front of the entire company, after losing my job, reputation, and brother's insurance. Harry flinched. I know. I was a coward. I should have spoken up. You should have done more than that. Her eyes blazed, the anger barely masking the hurt beneath. You had power, Harry, the kind of power I'll never have. And when I stood there humiliated, begging you to see the truth, you said nothing. Her words landed like blows, each one deserved. Harry swallowed hard. I can't undo what I did, but I can make it right. I can clear your name, expose them. And then what? Scarlett cut in, crossing her arms. You'll return to your penthouse in Empire, while I try to find another cleaning job to keep Michael alive. Harry's chest ached. He stepped closer, his voice softening. Scarlett, this isn't pity. It's a responsibility. I failed you when it mattered most, but I won't forget again. Scarlett's eyes glistened, but her posture remained rigid. Why? Why risk everything now? Out of guilt. Harry's voice caught. He looked at her. Really looked at the strength in her shoulders, the sorrow carved into her features, the fire that no humiliation could extinguish. Because you're the bravest person I've ever met, he said finally. Because you stood for me when no one else did. And because... He faltered, the admission trembling on his lips. Because you became the only person I trust, somewhere between your truth and my silence. Scarlett's breath hitched, but she turned away quickly, staring out the small window at the neon-lit street below. You don't know me, Harry. You don't know what I've had to give up to keep breathing. Our worlds aren't the same. Maybe not, he admitted. But I don't care. I'm done pretending loyalty to people who betrayed me. I'd rather fight alongside someone who has nothing but the truth. Silence stretched between them for a moment, broken only by the faint hum of Michael's oxygen machine down the hall. Scarlett closed her eyes, gripping the counter's edge as if steadying herself. When she spoke, her voice was softer, fragile. Michael needs surgery. Without insurance, I don't know how I'll pay for it. I've been working 2 extra jobs, but it's never enough. Every day I wake up terrified it'll be his last. Harry felt something in him shatter. The betrayal of Marcus and Sophia was one wound. But this, Scarlett's quiet, relentless struggle, was another, a more profound injustice. I'll take care of it, he said firmly. Scarlett spun to face him, anger flaring again. No, I don't need your charity. It's not charity, Harry insisted. It's me fixing the damage I caused. If I hadn't stayed silent, you'd still have your job. You'd still have the insurance. Her lips trembled, but she shook her head. You think money fixes everything. It doesn't. Trust, that's what you broke, and I don't know if I can give that back. Harry's chest tightened, but he nodded slowly. Then let me earn it. Not with words. With actions. Scarlett stared at him for a long moment, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Then she turned away again, her voice low. Get out, Harry. I can't do this tonight. The finality in her tone struck him like a closing door, sharper than the one that had locked behind her in the auditorium. Harry lingered, searching for words, but none would bridge the chasm between them. At last he nodded quietly. placing the evidence folder on the table. "If you ever want to see it," he said softly, "it's yours." And then he left the weight of her silence, heavier than the night pressing in around him. On the street below, Harry stood beside his car, staring up at the dim window of apartment 2B. He could almost see her silhouette, proud even in pain. The billionaire felt helpless for the first time in years, not against markets or competitors, but against the walls around a single woman's heart. He whispered into the cold night air, a vow no one but the city would hear. "I'll earn your trust, Scarlett, even if it takes everything I have." And with that, Harry Nelson drove away, not in triumph, but in determination. The hospital corridors smelled faintly of antiseptic and stale coffee, a mix of sterility and exhaustion that clung to every visitor's coat. Scarlett Anderson sat in a plastic chair near the cardiology wing, her fingers tightly laced as though she could keep her brother alive simply by holding on. Michael was inside with Dr. Rodriguez, undergoing another round of tests. Every beep of the monitor beyond that door pressed against Scarlett's chest. She had grown used to this rhythm, the waiting, the praying, the dread. But today felt heavier. The job she had lost meant more than humiliation. It meant the collapse of Michael's coverage. Every minute the doctors spoke about surgery was a reminder of the $100,000 wall between hope and despair. Scarlett bit her lip until she tasted copper. She had tried everything: extra restaurant shifts, late-night cleaning gigs, even considering loans that no bank would approve. And still the numbers never added up. The door creaked open. Dr. Rodriguez, a tall man with kind eyes, stepped into the hall. "Miss Anderson," he said gently, "may we speak in my office?" Scarlett stood, her knees trembling. She followed him into the small room with medical charts and family photos. The blinds let in muted sunlight streaking across the desk. "Michael's condition is stable for now, and Dr. Rodriguez has begun. But the valve replacement cannot be delayed much longer, weeks, perhaps months." Scarlett nodded, her throat tightening. "I know. I've been trying to—" He raised a hand, stopping her. "That's why I called you in. We've received notice from the hospital board. Michael has been approved for full coverage under a medical aid program." Scarlett blinked, her mind blank. "A program? Yes." Dr. Rodriguez smiled warmly. "The hospital sometimes applies on behalf of patients with severe conditions. In Michael's case, the surgery and aftercare will be fully covered. We can schedule it for next week." The words hit her like sunlight through storm clouds. Scarlett's lips parted, but no sound came. Relief washed over her so quickly that it nearly buckled her knees. "You mean—" Her voice cracked. "It's all paid for. Completely," the doctor confirmed. "You and your brother won't need to worry about the expenses. All you need to do is focus on his recovery." Scarlett covered her mouth with both hands, tears welling. She nodded furiously, unable to speak. Dr. Rodriguez's smile softened. "Take a moment. You deserve this peace." She stumbled into the hallway, her body trembling as though a decade of weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Leaning against the cool wall, Scarlett let the tears spill unashamed. For months, she had lived in fear that she might lose him. And now, hope. Real hope. Michael found her moments later, still pale but smiling. "Scarlett, why are you crying?" She rushed forward, wrapping him in a careful hug. "Because you're going to be okay," she whispered. "The surgery, it's covered. They approved a program." Michael pulled back, his eyes wide. "Are you serious?" She nodded, laughter breaking through her sobs. "Yes, they're scheduling it for next week." Her brother's face lit up, fragile joy blooming across his tired features. "Scarlett, that's a miracle." That night, back in their small apartment, Scarlett sat by the window long after Michael had fallen asleep. The street lamps painted silver streaks across her face, her hands still trembling from the day's revelation. A miracle, Michael had said. But Scarlett knew enough of the world to be suspicious. Programs like that didn't simply appear out of nowhere. Hospitals didn't cover $200,000 surgeries without reason. Her mind flickered to Harry Nelson. She remembered the determination in his eyes when he had stood in her apartment vowing to make things right. She remembered how he had placed the folder on her table, leaving without forcing her to read it. Could it be him? Scarlett shook her head fiercely, fighting back the thought. If it was Harry, then what was this? Another attempt to buy his way out of guilt. Another reminder that her dignity came with a price tag only he could afford. She pressed her forehead to the glass, fighting the storm inside her. Gratitude warred with pride, relief with anger. She didn't want to need him, and yet if it was him, he had saved Michael's life. Across town, in a penthouse glowing against the night, Harry Nelson sat in his office chair, staring at the confirmation email on his laptop. The transfer had gone through. The hospital had accepted the funds under the anonymous donor program. Michael Anderson's surgery was scheduled. Harry leaned back, his chest tight with something he hadn't felt in years. Not triumph, not the hollow satisfaction of a deal, but the fragile warmth of doing something right. He had asked for no recognition. He didn't want Scarlett to know. If she believed it was a miracle, so be it. Let her feel the world had finally chosen kindness. But deep down, a part of him hoped she would guess. Not for his ego, but for the chance that she might see he was more than the coward who stayed silent, more than the man who had let her down. Harry walked along Michigan Avenue the following afternoon, the air sharp with early winter chill. He knew where Scarlett worked her weekend shifts, a downtown accounting office. He had accidentally discovered it while tracing extra cleaning contracts in Nelson Global's files. Through the glass storefront, he saw her. Scarlett stood on a small ladder, cleaning the top corner of a window. Her hair was pulled back, her uniform plain, but her movements carried the same quiet dignity that had first disarmed him. She belonged to a world of hard work and survival, yet she moved with the grace of someone who refused to bow to it. Harry's chest tightened. He waited until she stepped outside, a bag slung over her shoulder. She started toward the subway. Her gaze focused ahead when she spotted him leaning against a lamppost. Her body stiffened. "Are you following me now?" she asked, her tone sharp. Harry shook his head, though his smile was weary. "Not following and looking for you." Scarlett crossed her arms. "What do you want, Harry? I heard about Michael's surgery." He said quietly that it's been approved. Her eyes narrowed. "And how would you know that I have ways of finding out?" He hesitated, then added softly, "I'm glad, truly glad." Scarlett studied him for a long moment, suspicion simmering beneath the surface. It was some aid program. At least that's what the doctor said. Harry held her gaze. "Then that's good news. Don't question miracles too hard." Something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, realization, anger. "Was it you?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. He swallowed, searching for words. He could deny it, let her believe the fiction. Or he could tell the truth, risk her pride, her fury. But before he could answer, she shook her head bitterly. "It was you. You think you can throw money at my life and erase what happened." Harry stepped closer, his voice firm but low. "No, money doesn't fix anything. I guess it saves time. And time is what Michael needs. I didn't do it for gratitude. I didn't do it for forgiveness. I did it because it was the right thing." Scarlett's breath caught her lips, trembling, as if torn between shouting and crying. "You don't get it," she whispered. "Every time you appear, you remind me of what I lost. My job, my name, my pride. And now even this This miracle comes with your shadow behind it. Harry's chest ached, but he didn't retreat. Maybe so, but I'd rather live in your shadow than watch from mine while you carry all the weight alone. Scarlett turned away, blinking hard against the tears threatening to fall. The city roared around them. Taxis, sirens, footsteps, but it felt like only the two existed in that small circle of space. For the first time, she didn't tell him to leave. And for Harry, that was enough. The cafe on the corner of Roosevelt Road was the place most people hurried past without noticing. Its wooden sign was faded, and the windows were fogged by steam from the espresso machine inside. But Scarlett Anderson liked it here. The seats were worn, the tables scarred by years of use, and the hum of quiet conversation was gentler than the noise of the city outside. She hadn't planned to come here tonight. After her shift at the accounting office, she had intended to head straight home. But when Harry Nelson appeared outside, his expression lined with fatigue and something that looked like longing, she found herself hesitating. Against her better judgment, she heard herself say, "There's a cafe on the corner. If you want to talk, we can go there." And now, 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee sending up curls of steam between them. Scarlett stirred her drink with slow, deliberate motions, her gaze fixed on the dark liquid. Harry didn't touch his coffee at all. He only watched her as though every detail, the curve of her cheekbone, the quiet strength in her posture, was something fragile he had no right to disturb. Scarlett broke the silence first. "Why here, Harry? Why keep chasing me when you have an empire to run?" He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "Because my empire isn't worth anything if I can't face the truth. And the truth is, you're the only one who forced me to see what I didn't want to see." Scarlett's eyes flicked to his, startled by the rawness in his voice. She looked away quickly. "Please don't put me on a pedestal. I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was wrong. And that's precisely why I need you," Harry said softly. "Because you don't bend when it's easier to look away." Scarlett swallowed hard, her hands tightening around the mug. She wanted to believe him, but her heart still bore the bruise of that day in the auditorium, his silence echoing louder than Marcus's lies. "You say that now," she murmured, "but when it mattered most, you chose loyalty to your friend over the truth standing right before you." Harry flinched. The words struck the sorest wound inside him. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But Scarlett—" He paused, his voice trembling slightly. "Give me the chance to prove I've learned from it. Just one chance." The air between them grew heavier, charged with more than just the weight of betrayal. There was something else, something unspoken that lingered in every glance, every breath. Scarlett cleared her throat, forcing her voice steady. "You said you found proof. Please, show me." Harry reached for his leather briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. He spread the papers across the table. Copies of Addendum Z, the forged contracts, the bank transfers, the incriminating emails. Scarlett leaned closer, scanning each page carefully. Her brows furrowed, her lips parting slightly, as she pieced together the scheme's scale. "This is worse than I imagined," she whispered. Her finger traced one line of text. "They're not just stealing control. They're burying you in debt so you can't fight back." Harry nodded grimly. "They wanted me ruined both financially and personally. Marcus would take the company. Sophia, she'd enjoy watching me crumble." Scarlett's jaw tightened. "How could you not see it? 15 years of friendship, Harry. Didn't you ever notice the signs?" His gaze darkened with pain. "I trusted him. He was like a brother. And maybe that was my weakness. Trust." Scarlett looked up at him, then her expression softening despite herself. Trust isn't weakness. Blind trust is. There's a difference. Harry's lips curved in a faint, rueful smile. You sound like you've been teaching me all along. You may need a teacher. For the first time that night, Scarlett allowed herself a small smile. Brief, but real. Harry's chest tightened at the sight. They spoke for hours, the cafe around them, gradually emptying as night deepened. Scarlett outlined what she still had photos taken from Leandro's office recordings on her phone, fragments of evidence that could support Harry's documents. Together, they began to sketch a plan. The board has to see this, Scarlett said firmly. Marcus won't have time to twist the narrative if you bring it directly to them. Harry nodded. But he knows I'm suspicious. He'll try to strike first. Then we get ahead of him, Scarlett replied, her eyes alight with determination. You're not just defending yourself, you're exposing a crime, and the board won't forgive him for jeopardizing the company. Harry studied her, struck by the fire in her voice. She wasn't simply helping him out of pity. She believed in justice, in doing what was right, even when it cost her everything. And for the first time in years, Harry felt something stir inside him that wasn't anger or regret. It was hope. The waitress approached, setting the check discreetly on the table. Scarlett reached for it out of habit, but Harry's hand covered hers before she could. Their fingers touched briefly, but the contact sent a current racing through them. Scarlett froze, her pulse quickening. She looked up, meeting his gaze. Harry's eyes were blue steel, steady and searching, and not demanding, not forceful, just there offering, waiting. Scarlett pulled her hand back, her cheeks warming. Old habits, she muttered. Harry smiled faintly. Some habits should be broken. For a long moment, silence fell again. But it wasn't the silence of distance. It was charged, fragile, alive. Scarlett sipped the last coffee, trying to calm her racing heart. This was dangerous. She couldn't afford to let emotions tangle with strategy. But Harry's presence, his sincerity, his quiet regret, was undoing walls she had spent years building. Finally, she stood, pulling her coat tight around her. We should go. Michael will worry if I'm too late. Harry rose as well, slipping the folder back into his briefcase. I'll walk you to the station. Scarlett hesitated, then nodded. Outside, the city glowed with 1,000 lights, the air crisp with the promise of winter. They walked side by side down the quiet street, their steps unconsciously in rhythm. At the entrance to the subway, Scarlett stopped. She turned to face him, her breath visible in the cold. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For listening. For not treating me like I was invisible. Harry's throat tightened. Scarlett, you were never invisible to me. Not once. The words lingered in the air, heavier than the night around them. Scarlett's lips parted, but she found no reply. And before she could think, Harry stepped just slightly closer, not enough to crowd her, only enough that she could feel his warmth in the chill. His voice dropped, raw and tentative. May I? Scarlett's breath caught. For a heartbeat, the world stilled, the rumble of trains below, the neon signs above, all fading into silence. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly. Harry leaned down, pressing his lips gently to hers. It was a kiss, both hesitant and confident, soft, yet charged with all the words they hadn't spoken. Scarlett's hands trembled as they rose to his chest, and she felt his heart beating fast, steady, real. When they pulled apart, she was breathless, her cheeks flushed. This makes things more complicated, she whispered. Harry's smile was quiet, tender. The best things usually are. Scarlett shook her head, but a small laugh escaped her. She stepped back, moving toward the stairs. I'll call you tomorrow, she said, her voice steady now. We'll finalize the plan. and talk about us?" Harry asked softly. Scarlett glanced over her shoulder, her eyes shimmering between challenge and promise. "Maybe." Then she descended into the subway, leaving Harry standing beneath the city lights, his chest alight with something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The boardroom at Nelson Global gleamed with polished mahogany and glass where billion-dollar futures were written and destroyed. Tomorrow, it would become a battlefield. Harry Nelson knew it. All day he had walked the edges of his empire with a storm behind his calm smile, signing papers, greeting executives, attending meetings that blurred together. On the surface, everything looked untouched. But beneath a single truth, pulsed like fire. Marcus Hale and Sophia Lane had engineered his downfall, and tomorrow he would expose them. And he would not do it alone. That evening, Harry arrived at a quiet apartment building on the south side. The cracked bricks and narrow hallways were far from his world of penthouses and polished lobbies, yet he walked through them with a sense of gravity, not arrogance. He stopped at door 2B and knocked softly. Scarlett opened it, her dark curls tied back a loose sweater hanging on her frame. There was weariness in her eyes, but also a spark determination that steadied him. "You came," she said. "I told you I would," Harry replied. She stepped aside, letting him into the modest living room. Michael was asleep in the bedroom, the hum of his oxygen machine faint in the background. Scarlett motioned toward the small dining table, where papers were already spread out. Her phone, a battered laptop, stacks of printed screenshots and photographs. "Everything I have," she said, sliding into a chair. "If tomorrow works, this will be enough to destroy them." Harry sat opposite her, his briefcase by his side. For a moment, neither spoke, the gravity of what they were about to attempt heavy between them. Finally, Scarlett broke the silence. "We have one chance. If Marcus suspects we're on to him, he'll twist the story before we can reveal the truth. You know how people like him operate. They plant doubt. They make lies look more believable than facts." Harry leaned forward, his eyes steady on hers. "That's why we won't give him the chance. Tomorrow, every board member will have a copy of the addendum, the forged contracts, and the bank transfers before Marcus even opens his mouth. Scarlett, we'll corner him with his weapons." She studied him, noting the quiet intensity in his voice. "You've thought this through." "I've had sleepless nights to do nothing else." Scarlett's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Welcome to my world." Hours slipped past as they worked together. Scarlett replayed the recordings she had made weeks ago, Marcus's voice filling the small apartment. "Once he signs, we'll have complete control of the assets." "David's always been too naive." Harry stiffened at the sound, the betrayal still raw, but Scarlett reached out, brushing his hand lightly as if to anchor him. "Listen to it as evidence, not as memory," she said. Her touch was brief, almost accidental, but it steadied him more than any drink or distraction could. They pieced together the timeline, cross-checked documents, and rehearsed what would be said in the boardroom. Scarlett's mind was sharp, her instincts precise. She saw gaps. Harry had missed anticipated arguments Marcus might make. "You should have been in that chair years ago," Harry said at one point, nodding at the documents. Scarlett arched a brow. "Which chair?" "Any of them," he answered. "Boardroom, strategy table. Hell, the CEO's if you wanted it. You see the truth faster than anyone I know." Her throat tightened at the sincerity in his voice. "Flattery won't win this war, Harry." "It's not flattery," he replied. "It's a fact." For a moment, silence fell again, different this time. Not heavy, but charged alive. By midnight, the table was a battlefield of paper and ink, but the plan was clear. Harry leaned back, rubbing his temples. Scarlett gathered the empty mugs from their coffee, her movements quiet. "You should get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow will be brutal." Harry's gaze followed her, lingering on the curve of her profile in the dim light. "So should you." Scarlett set the mugs down and met his eyes. "I've lived with brutality for a long time." Something in her tone cracked him open. He rose slowly, crossing the small space between them. The air shifted, thickened, until only inches separated them. "Scarlett," he said softly, his voice almost raw. "If tomorrow goes wrong?" She shook her head sharply. "Don't say that. It won't. But if it does." He paused, searching her face. "I need you to know something. You were right about me, about my cowardice, my silence. But these past days, you've made me want to be better. Not for the company. For you." Her breath caught her pulse hammering in her ears. She wanted to resist, to remind him that this was business strategy survival. But how he looked at her, like she wasn't invisible or just a janitor, or a burden, melted something inside her. "You don't owe me those words," she whispered. "No," he said, stepping closer still. "But I need to tell them." The room seemed to fold around them, quiet, except for the hum of Michael's machine. And then, slowly, Harry reached out his fingers, brushing hers. Scarlett didn't pull away. The world outside could burn tomorrow, but the flame between them was all that existed in that moment. When Harry left near dawn, the first light of day touching the cracked walls of Scarlett's building, his heart felt heavier and lighter. He had no illusions the battle with Marcus would be fierce. But now, he wasn't fighting alone. Scarlett watched from the window as his car disappeared down the street. Her chest tightened, torn between fear and something dangerously close to hope. For years, she had carried burdens in silence. Tomorrow she would take them with him, and that thought frightened her more than Marcus ever could. The boardroom on the 52nd floor of Nelson Global's tower gleamed, with its usual sterile elegance, polished oak table leather chairs, panoramic windows that looked out over Manhattan's skyline. But beneath its sheen, tension roiled like a storm. Harry Nelson sat at the head of the table, his jaw tight, his gaze unyielding. Around him, board members shuffled papers, cleared throats, exchanged wary glances. They had heard whispers, rumors of conflict at the top. But today, the truth would be laid bare. At precisely 9 o'clock, the double doors opened. Marcus Hale strode in, immaculately dressed, in a gray tailored suit, Sophia Lane at his side, in a crimson dress that drew every eye. Their confidence was unsettling, a predator's calm. "Gentlemen, ladies," Marcus said with a thin smile as he sat opposite Harry. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We have urgent matters to address." Harry leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "Indeed we do." For a moment, silence crackled between them. Two men who had once been brothers in arms now sat as enemies. Marcus began smoothly, his tone measured but loud enough to dominate the room. "Before we proceed with the merger vote, I must present evidence regarding our CEO, Harry Nelson." A murmur swept the board. Harry's expression didn't change, but inside his chest tightened. He knew the ambush was coming. Marcus snapped fingers, and Sophia slid a sleek folder across the table. Copies were distributed swiftly by assistants. Board members unfolded the documents, brows furrowing, as they scanned forged emails, doctored bank transfers, and photographs from Harry's visits to Scarlett's apartment. Mr. Nelson Marcus, continued feigning regret, has been involved in an inappropriate relationship with a former employee. Additionally, company funds' significant sums were misused to cover her sister's medical expenses. This, he tapped a page, for emphasis, is a direct abuse of power and breach of fiduciary duty. Gasps rippled around the table. One board member adjusted his glasses, and another whispered sharply to his neighbor. Harry spoke, his voice low but firm. Fabrications. Every single one. Marcus smiled shark-like. Fabrications. Then you could explain the $200,000 wire transfer under your authorization. Or the security footage of you entering her building late at night. Or these emails. They're forged. Harry cut in, his voice like steel. And you know it. Sophia leaned forward, her voice silk wrapped around poison. Oh, Harry, always so naive. Who will they believe? A man clouded by his infatuation with a cleaning woman, or the evidence in front of their eyes? Her words were a blade meant to humiliate. Harry's fists tightened under the table. He could feel the board wavering, their trust slipping like sand. And then the doors opened again. Scarlett Anderson walked into the boardroom. Her presence was quiet, yet commanding, her dark skin glowing against the cream blouse she wore, her posture tall, unbroken. She carried a slim folder in her hands, her eyes fixed not on Marcus or Sophia, but directly on Harry. Something in his chest eased just slightly. "Forgive my interruption," Scarlett said, her voice steady. "If truth is on trial here, it deserves all the evidence." Marcus's smile faltered. "And you are?" Scarlett set the folder on the table. "Scarlett Anderson, the so-called former employee you've chosen to smear." The room grew still. Every gaze followed her as she slid documents across the table. "These are the original files. Photographs, audio recordings, contracts. Each time-stamped, each verified. They prove that Marcus Hale and Sophia Lane engineered a fraudulent takeover, forging addenda and siphoning millions into offshore accounts." She clicked her phone, and Marcus's voice filled the room. "Once he signs, we'll have complete control. David's always been too naive." The board stiffened. Scarlett's gaze cut through Marcus like glass. "That's not the voice of a loyal partner. That's the voice of a traitor." Marcus shot to his feet, his composure fracturing. "This is outrageous. She's lying. Enough." Harry's voice thundered across the room, louder than ever. He rose slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the table. "You betrayed this company, Marcus. You betrayed me. And worse, you thought you could bury the truth beneath your lies." He turned to the board, his voice unwavering. "Yes, I visited Scarlett. Yes, I care about her. And I will not apologize for respecting the woman who risked everything to expose the rot within these walls. She is the reason you're hearing the truth today. And if you want to judge me for trusting someone brave enough to speak when I was too blind, then so be it." Scarlett's breath caught. His words were not just defense, but confession. Public, raw, unashamed. The board members exchanged glances, whispers swelling. Some eyes lingered on Marcus's forged documents, others on Scarlett's clean evidence. Sophia's face twisted with fury. "You're throwing away your legacy for her. For a woman who scrubs floors." Harry's gaze snapped to her, cold and cutting. "Scarlett Anderson has more integrity, in one word, than you ever had in your entire life." The silence that followed was thunderous. Finally, one board member cleared his throat. "Mr. Nelson, if these documents are genuine, Marcus Hale's position is untenable. Please send them to forensics," another insisted. "If they hold, he should be prosecuted." Marcus paled, sweat beading at his temple. Sophia whispered fiercely in his ear, but her poise was crumbling. Harry looked at Scarlett, his chest heavy with both relief and awe. In this sterile battlefield of power, she was the one who had turned the tide. Hours later, after the board dismissed Marcus and Sophia pending investigation, the room emptied slowly. Harry and Scarlett remained behind, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. "You saved me," Harry said quietly. Scarlett shook her head. "You saved yourself. I just refused to stay silent." But when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. They stood together in the empty boardroom for a long moment, the city glittering beyond the glass. Harry leaned down, his voice husky. Whatever happens next with the company with the scandal, I want you in it with me." Scarlett met his gaze, her lips trembling into a faint smile. "Then, don't waste this chance, Harry. Not with me. Not with yourself." And when he kissed her, it was not the stolen, hesitant kiss of before. It was sure, unguarded, a promise, written in the quiet between their hearts. The story of Harry and Scarlett reminds us sometimes betrayal sharpens truth, and love is found where no one expects it. If this journey has touched your heart, don't forget to hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and follow the channel to continue exploring the next chapters together. Every response from you is the motivation that keeps these passionate and dramatic love stories alive.